The Miller Family and the Forgotten Daughter. In the quiet suburbs of Cedarville, Illinois, the Miller family seemed perfect from the outside. White picket fence, 3-bedroom house, and a golden retriever named Max. But behind closed doors, their story carried shadows. The youngest daughter, Nicole Miller, born in 1993, grew up as the invisible thread woven loosely into the family fabric. While her older brother, Benjamin, 3 years her senior, received praise for his smallest achievements, Nicole's milestones often went unnoticed or were dismissed as mere afterthoughts. Linda and Thomas Miller, her parents, never intended to hurt Nicole, or at least that's what they'd say. Yet their favoritism was evident in everything from dinner table conversations, always centered around Benjamin's sports games or school victories, to photo albums crammed with his pictures, while Nicole appeared only on the fringes of family events. Christmas mornings brought Benjamin new bikes and gadgets. Nicole received something small, practical, like a sweater. Even at family gatherings, relatives ruffled Ben's hair, asking about his latest stories, while Nicole learned to fade into the wallpaper. At school, Nicole's teachers saw a quiet, smart girl with a worn-out backpack and a habit of hesitating before speaking. Her classmates admired Benjamin for his outgoing charm, never realizing Nicole's talents. Her beautiful sketches, her thoughtful poems, were quietly packed away in drawers under her bed. When things went wrong at home, a broken vase, or a lost set of keys, Nicole was the quickest scapegoat. She grew up hearing familiar lines. Be more like your brother, or you're just being sensitive. Nicole, as if by default, became the mediator during arguments, the helper in the kitchen, the child who rarely asked for anything, because she learned early that asking yielded little. Sometimes she wondered if being invisible was safer than being seen only as the problem. Those formative years shaped Nicole. Her strong sense of self-reliance, her empathy for outsiders, and, beneath it all, a quiet fire urging her to someday prove she was more than the family afterthought. Every unfair moment, every missed birthday, built up like bricks in a wall she swore she'd one day climb over, even if she had to do it alone. The silent agonies of childhood. Nicole's childhood was marked by more than just being overlooked. It was a quiet landscape of daily heartaches that ate away at her sense of self-worth. The pain was subtle, almost invisible from the outside, but deeply etched into her private world. While Benjamin's mistakes might be brushed aside with a handshake or a gentle laugh, Nicole was held to a different, unwritten standard. If a glass shattered in the kitchen or mud got tracked through the living room, Nicole's name was the first to be called. Nicole, what have you done now? Linda would snap, her voice tired, but unwavering in its accusation, not even giving Nicole the chance to explain. It wasn't just the scolding that stung. It was the uneasy feeling of never being enough, the hollow, quiet ache of trying so hard just to be noticed, or at the very least, not blamed for everything that went wrong. Nicole learned quickly not to expect justice or affection. Her art projects hung crookedly on the fridge for a day or two before being replaced by Benjamin's sports ribbons. Her report cards with straight A's were met with a perfunctory nod, while a single B meant an extra hour at the kitchen table, going over math drills with her dad. Birthdays were a yearly lesson in disappointment. One year, Nicole remembered blowing out her 7 candles alone at the little kitchen table, while Benjamin celebrated with a backyard party crowded with his friends and family. The leftover cake, with her name spelled wrong in rushed icing, said more than her parents ever did. The loneliness followed her to school. Knowing her brother's shadow always lingered, Nicole became the quiet one, the listener, the friend who cheered others' victories without ever expecting her own to be noticed. She withdrew a little more each year, her laughter a rare sound, her tears more common in the dark, silent hours at night. She started a habit of writing in secret notebooks and tucking poems under her mattress, words that spoke of longing, confusion, sometimes anger, but mostly hope. Hope that maybe, someday, someone would see her for who she really was. Those silent agonies didn't just end with childhood. They shaped the lens through which Nicole viewed the world, made her both fiercely independent and deeply compassionate toward anyone who felt like an outsider. Pain had carved a place for itself in her heart, but so had resilience. Nicole would come to carry both with her, long after she left the Miller house behind. The determination to leave and redefine her life. Turning 18 in the summer of 2011, Nicole Miller knew her time in Blue Ridge had reached a breaking point. The suffocating routine of being the family scapegoat spurred her toward a new future, one built on her own terms, far from the whispered judgments and invisible ceilings of home. In that final year of high school, her eyes were set firmly on escape, fueled by a quiet but unyielding hope that somewhere beyond these familiar streets, she could finally become someone who mattered. Nicole's academic achievements had always been consistent, a silent rebellion against the apathy at home. But now she doubled down. Late nights, she pored over college applications at the kitchen counter while the house slept, her fingers trembling with a mixture of anxiety and determination. She aimed for scholarships, the only path that would allow her to leave without her parents' financial blessing. The acceptance letter from the University of Michigan arrived in a thin envelope, almost lost among utility bills. Nicole opened it alone, an unstoppable grin breaking across her face as she read the words she'd barely dared hope for. Full scholarship awarded. She shared the news with her parents over meatloaf dinner. Ben busy, showing off new cleats to Tom. Linda looked surprised. Tom offered a flat, "That's good, Nicole," before returning to the weather forecast. It didn't matter. Nicole gently pushed her acceptance letter back into her folder and began to quietly plan her move northward. Arriving in Ann Arbor that fall was a revelation. The city pulsed with possibility, streets lined with bookstores, coffee shops humming with laughter. Students from all over the country chasing ambitions they wore openly on their sleeves. For the first time in her life, Nicole stomped through autumn leaves without shrinking herself to fit the mold others expected. Here, she could be anyone. She joined student organizations, worked odd jobs at the campus library, survived on ramen noodles, and relished the freedom of being completely responsible for herself. Nicole's drive was as relentless as it was quiet. She stepped up for every open opportunity, assistant positions in research labs, volunteer work at the university's counseling center, late-night study groups with classmates who became family. When money ran tight, Nicole worked extra shifts or tutored underclassmen, always with the same goal: never having to ask her parents for help, never giving them cause to diminish her efforts. Those 4 years were tougher than anything Nicole could have imagined. There were late nights when exhaustion and loneliness felt unbearable, when the strain of balancing work, study, and basic survival threatened to overwhelm her. In her tiny dorm, she sometimes cried herself to sleep, confronted by memories of home, her mother's distant praise, her father's unmet expectations. But every morning, she woke up determined to press forward. By senior year, Nicole's reputation as a resilient, empathetic leader had grown. She was offered an internship in a budding tech company in San Francisco, a world away from Blue Ridge, both in distance and spirit. She accepted without hesitation, packing her dreams into 2 battered suitcases and a battered heart that had learned to mend itself. San Francisco in 2015 was electrifying, a city of innovation, where dreams either soared or died spectacularly. At her new company, Nicole worked long hours, rising from unpaid intern to team lead in less than 2 years. Her creativity and grit, honed in the quiet battles of her childhood, became her greatest assets. She made friends who loved her for her sharp wit and loyal spirit. She found mentors who encouraged her, not because of family obligation, but on her own merit. Nicole never let go of the survival instincts she learned at home. But in this new world, they became tools of triumph rather than shields against hurt. By her late 20s, Nicole had launched her own tech startup, focused on mental health resources, pouring her empathy and tenacity into every decision. Success followed, built on sacrifice, vision, and the singular drive to never let her past define her future. It wasn't a flawless journey. There were nights when old wounds reopened, punctuated by emails from her parents that felt both hopeful and hollow. Nicole learned that healing wasn't about forgetting, but about forging ahead and rewriting her story day by day. And as she stood in her sleek corner office, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows, she finally understood what it meant to choose her own family, the one built from loyalty, understanding, and mutual respect, rather than the one she'd been handed at birth. Her hard-won independence would soon be tested anew in the years to come. But Nicole Miller was more than ready. Each step away from Blue Ridge had been a step toward reclaiming her life, and she would never look back, becoming a successful businesswoman. Rising through the ranks in Silicon Valley was no small feat, especially for someone who started with little more than hope, resilience, and a battered suitcase. But Nicole Miller had grown used to being underestimated, and she had learned to turn that doubt into fuel. By her late 20s, Nicole was no longer just another face in a crowded boardroom. She'd become a name whispered with respect across the startup scene. Nicole's journey from a neglected daughter to a celebrated entrepreneur started with a question she often wrote in her early journals. How can I use what I've learned in loneliness to help others feel seen? After her promotion to project manager at the tech firm, Nicole began sketching out her own software company, one dedicated to mental health and individual empowerment. The vision was simple yet radical, an app that would let users anonymously log daily experiences, process difficult emotions, and connect with supportive communities, all with the assurance their voices wouldn't be swallowed by algorithmic noise or pushed aside by louder personalities. With the little savings she had, Nicole went into high gear. Days were spent pitching investors, nights spent coding alongside her small but fiercely loyal team. Her company, Inner Voice, launched in 2019. The first year nearly broke her. There were months when Nicole went without a paycheck, nights she slept under her desk, code bugs that threatened to wipe weeks of progress. Skeptics hammered her ideas, investors questioned her ability. Old anxieties whispered that she'd never really escape her past. But Nicole pushed back against every setback with an empathy and persistence that couldn't be faked. She made it a point to build a company culture that prized listening, not just talking, collaboration, not competition. Employees showed up as themselves. Clients sent thank you notes. The media took notice. Forbes profiled her as a disruptor with heart. Nicole, ever wary of Shallow praise, let herself enjoy a quiet pride she'd cultivated entirely on her own. Profits grew. So did Nicole's reputation. She was asked to speak at women's leadership conferences. Her company won awards for both innovation and workplace inclusivity. She built new offices in New York and Seattle, drawing in young engineers and entrepreneurs, drawn to her vision and sense of fairness. By the summer of 2024, Nicole was featured on magazine covers. The camera captured a confident woman with kind eyes, a storyteller, a survivor, who represented not just business acumen, but the power of hard-won empathy. Wealth, which once seemed so out of reach, arrived almost as an afterthought. Nicole bought a loft in the city, invested in community art programs, established a scholarship at her old high school for kids who feel invisible. She still made time to volunteer and to mentor young women who, like her, navigated the world with invisible scars. Fame never changed Nicole's core. She greeted her growing success not with arrogance, but with gratitude, both for her journey and for each person who'd walked with her along the way. Yet even as the world applauded, Nicole never forgot the ache of being the forgotten child. Every achievement was, in some way, a conversation with that younger version of herself, the girl who needed to know she was enough. Nicole's story, told at TEDx stages and in late-night texts to friends, was less about victory than about what it means to finally see and celebrate your own reflection. Family reaches out in times of need. The years passed in the distance, both emotional and physical, between Nicole and her family grew. She would call home on holidays, send cards for birthdays, and even invite her parents to see her new apartment or the office, though they rarely made the trip. Tyler, meanwhile, had set up his own small business in Ashwood, juggling debts and the uncertainty of the Midwest economy. Thomas and Karen, growing older, faced mounting medical expenses and a mortgage they were struggling to pay off. Their retirement dreams dimmed quietly. By early 2024, trouble hit the Miller family hard. Tyler's business failed after a damaging lawsuit from a former partner, leaving him with crushing obligations and a damaged reputation in town. Thomas had to retire early for health reasons. A heart condition left him unable to work. Karen's part-time job as a secretary barely paid the bills. Medical debts piled up, tempers frayed, and for the first time in decades, the family's comfortable suburban life seemed in real danger. Pride had always kept the Millers from asking Nicole for anything. Deep down, they knew their relationship with her was strained. Her success a source of confusion, perhaps even guilt. Tyler grumbled about her big-shot job in the city, while Karen made small talk on the phone, never quite broaching real issues. But as their accounts emptied and overdue notices accumulated, options ran out. It was Karen who finally made the call on a rainy March night. Nicole was finishing a late conference call when her mother's name flashed on the screen. The conversation was awkward. Pleasantries, clipped small talk, before Karen finally broke down, voice soft and tearful. "Sweetheart, things are hard here. I didn't want to bother you, but we're really struggling. Tyler, too. Is there any way you can help us out?" Nicole listened quietly as her mother recounted the list: the debts, the lost business, the risk of losing their home. The request was neither specific nor small. For a moment, she felt the old ache, that familiar urge to fix things and be the easy one all over again. But she also remembered every ignored plea, every moment she'd been told, "Not now," or "maybe next time," as a child. This time, things would be different. Nicole asked for a few days to think about it. She called close friends and her therapist, weighing what helping meant, not just financially, but emotionally. Was this a chance for healing or a reopening of wounds better left closed? She went for long walks, replaying childhood memories with every passing street lamp. Ultimately, Nicole crafted a response that was honest and, in its own way, just. She would help the Millers, but on her terms. She invited the family to Seattle and asked them to spend a summer living as she once had, together in a modest apartment, taking jobs at the lowest level in her company's operations. There would be no special favors, no doting. Instead, she wanted them to see her world, her hard-won independence, her loyal friends, the dignity that comes with being valued for your actions, not your proximity to someone else's success. Thomas was skeptical, Karen worried, and Tyler was downright offended. "What? You want us to be janitors or something?" he barked when Nicole called. She replied calmly,
Welcome.
"I want you to
I'm so
understand
glad
my
you're
life.
here.
That's all.
Thank you.
If you
It
do,
means a lot to
the
know
help
their
will
support.
follow." It
The
took
timeline
weeks
for
of
the alibi
arguments
doesn't
and
match the
soul
evidence we
searching.
found at the scene. We
But
have to reconsider
desperation
it.
makes people do
Sarah, it's
things
late.
they never
We've been over
imagined.
this a dozen times.
By early June, the Millers found themselves in a small, tidy, two-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Seattle. Nicole welcomed them, not as a daughter desperate for approval, but as a woman with her own boundaries. She coached them through entry-level orientation, helped them prepare for interviews at Radiant, and checked in, not as a savior, but as a colleague willing to extend a hand to those ready to learn. The process was humbling. Tyler struggled with teamwork, used to being the star at home. Thomas found it hard to let go of pride, taking directions from junior staff. Karen, however, grew into the challenge, forming connections with coworkers who reminded her of Nicole in her youth. Over shared dinners, and sometimes tears, the family began to talk honestly for the first time. Stories from Nicole's childhood, once dismissed or forgotten, now found their way into conversation. By summer's end, the Millers had a new perspective.
Congratulations
Their
on the big win,
relationship
Sarah.
with Nicole was by no means repaired entirely, but it was real, grounded in mutual understanding and respect. Nicole paid off the family's immediate debts and set up a financial plan, contingent upon their continued self-reliance. More valuable than the money, however, was the dignity and empathy they found in hard work, and in finally, truly, seeing Nicole for the remarkable woman she had become. The harsh conditions laid down. When the plea for help finally crossed the cold divide between Nicole Miller and her family, it came with an unspoken expectation, a hope that she would simply hand over what they needed,
Did you find
no
everything
questions
all right? That'll be
asked,
$12.50?
and perhaps wrap the act in unconditional forgiveness. But Nicole was no longer the overlooked daughter, desperate for a sliver of approval. Years of struggle had carved in her a deep sense of fairness, self-worth, and the knowledge that true change required more than just money. It meant reckoning with the past and understanding the pain that had shaped them all. Nicole spent sleepless nights considering her response. Her closest friends advised caution. Her therapist reminded her of the power, both healing and destructive, embedded in family ties. Memories returned,
Absolutely, darling.
sitting
Cheers
alone
to
on
that.
birthdays, unnoticed grades, the ache of being perpetually outshined by her brother. She weighed her capacity for empathy against her need for
So like I was
boundaries.
saying, I
This
left
wasn't
work
about
around 8,
revenge.
grabbed a
She
bite,
knew.
and then realized
It
I
was
forgot my
about
keys at the
forging
restaurant.
something real.
Had to go all the way back.
Accountability, understanding, and perhaps a dose of justice for her younger self. So, Nicole picked up the phone and called her family. Her voice, calm and resolute, carried a surprising offer. She would wipe their debts clean, give them a chance to rebuild, and help them find stability, but only under one strict condition. The entire Miller family must pack their bags and spend a full year living together with her in a modest apartment in Detroit. During this time, every member, her parents, and her brother, would work entry-level jobs at her company, Inner Voice, without privilege or special treatment. They would earn what they worked for, experience daily life as she had, and learn from the bottom up what it meant to truly build something out of nothing. At first, the Millers were stunned. Linda, her mother, recoiled in disbelief. "You're making us what? Live like interns?" Her father's pride bristled, and even her brother, so used to praise and deference, mocked the idea. But Nicole was unwavering. There would be no bailouts, no comfortable handouts, and no shortcuts. If they wanted her help, it was going to come at the cost of introspection and humility. This requirement wasn't born from spite, but necessity. Nicole had watched too many families, her own included, cling to old scripts, never daring to rewrite the story, forever stuck in a cycle of favoritism and resentment. She offered a new page, one where every member, regardless of past hierarchies, faced challenges on equal footing and proved themselves through effort, not entitlement. For Nicole, it was the only way true empathy and perhaps healing could begin. Linda wept, torn between humiliation and hope. Thomas, too worn by recent illness and financial strain, finally capitulated after weeks of tense calls. Even Benjamin, after furious arguments and wounded pride, had nowhere else to turn. One muggy day in late June, they arrived, suitcases in hand, at a low-rent apartment building in East Detroit. The place was clean but cramped. Nothing like their old rambling home or Benjamin's luxurious bachelor pad back in Illinois. Nicole greeted them at the door, not as a savior, but as someone keenly aware of what lay ahead. The rules were clear. Everyone pulled their weight. Chores were divided, meals rotated, just like they'd done in Nicole's college dorm years before. Wake-up calls were early. Transit to work was by bus. There were no family allowances or secret bonuses. Nicole personally arranged for her parents and brother to join separate departments in her company under direct supervision of senior managers, none of whom knew of their relationship to the CEO. They started in the mailroom, IT help desk, and QA testing, respectively. Critical but unglamorous roles, far from decision-making or comfort. The culture shock was immediate. Linda, always a homemaker or part-time secretary, now sorted mail and handled delivery schedules alongside 20-somethings half her age. She struggled at first, hands clumsy, ego bruised. Lunchtimes were awkward. Her co-workers swapped stories of college debt and side hustles. Thomas, who had been a mid-level manager at a hardware store decades back, found himself doing repetitive data checks, his health issues frustrating, but not exempting him from expectations. Benjamin, for the first time in his life, encountered a workspace where his last name carried no weight. The QA team demanded sharp focus, and mistakes meant redoing documentation, not getting a pass because of familial ties. There were stumbles, missed buses, late arrivals, cold dinners. The apartment felt even smaller in the evenings, tension thick as everyone returned, exhausted and sore. Fights erupted over chores. Old habits lingered. Sometimes Linda automatically deferred to Benjamin, or Thomas voiced disappointment in Nicole's methods. But Nicole stuck to her plan, refusing to let the past override the present. She knew that only sustained effort, forced outside the artificial comfort of old roles, could break the cycle that had defined them for so long. Yet, transformation happened in the smallest of moments. One evening, Nicole noticed Linda carefully helping a younger coworker write a resume. She had seen the girl, nervous, new in the city, struggling, and reached out, unprompted, recalling the loneliness Nicole herself once endured. Thomas, whose body ached from the repetitive motions of his desk job, began swapping stories at lunch with other older staff, learning to accept advice, not just give it. Benjamin, brash and sometimes resentful, finally admitted to a team lead. He didn't know how to format a dataset and was coached, patiently, by a junior intern. After the first few weeks, routines became less a source of friction and more an unexpected comfort. The Millers learned to budget groceries together, share family dinners, and slowly talk, not about Benjamin's achievements or their own regrets, but about the funny things that happened at work or the challenges of learning something new. Nicole often listened, quietly moved by their struggles and small victories. For the first time, the power dynamic of the family changed. Her parents and brother saw her not as an afterthought or simply the successful one, but as a peer who had survived hardship and through it built a life of meaning from nothing. The year was not without setbacks. Linda fell ill for a few weeks, and Nicole was forced to reassess boundaries. She cared for her mother, but didn't let her skip responsibilities when she was well. Benjamin almost quit, furious about a failed QA audit. But a heartfelt conversation with Nicole kept him from running. Old wounds reopened, arguments about the past, the pain of favoritism and invisibility. But now, instead of stifling or denying the issues, the family began to address them openly. Sometimes the discussions led to tears and raised voices, but they always circled back to respect and the stubborn will to try anew. Nicole also grew. She learned to let go of an instinctive need for control, to allow her family moments of failure, and to accept apologies, however awkwardly phrased. She attended family counseling sessions to help the Millers unpack decades of silence, and sometimes shared her own journals, reading aloud lines from poems written in the solitude of her teenage years. As months stretched into seasons, the Millers began to see the city and their daughter through new eyes. Work friends invited them to picnics. Neighbors stopped by for advice. Thomas took up gardening in a small patch of the community lot. Linda volunteered at the local youth center. Benjamin hosted a board game night for his new friends in QA. Sharing laughter Nicole never thought she'd hear from him outside the glare of their parents' approval. By the time the 12th month arrived, the change in the Millers was palpable. Their pride wore softer edges. Their appreciation for Nicole's struggles and successes was no longer perfunctory, but deeply felt. Most importantly, they began to value themselves and each other for more than just roles assigned by family or history. During a modest apartment celebration, Nicole handed each of them a letter. Their debts paid, job offers for more advanced positions at Intervoice, and an invitation to stay in Detroit or return home as they wished, on their own terms. Nicole's condition had not just been a trial, but a test of humility, endurance, and a lesson in the redemptive possibility of starting over. For her, it was also a chance to ensure that her family truly saw the daughter, sister, and woman she had become, not just with their eyes, but with hard-won understanding and respect. In the end, the year together forged something stronger than obligation, a bond built on compassion, honesty, and the shared climb toward dignity, the taste of justice and empathy. After a year that felt both endless and astonishingly brief, Nicole Miller's experiment in tough love drew to a close. The once fractious Miller family, who had entered Detroit angry, uncertain, and stuck in outgrown roles, found themselves, almost to their own disbelief, changed and softened by the relentless, humble rhythm of shared struggle. But the greatest transformation was less about money or job titles and more about the subtle taste of justice and empathy that now lingered in every interaction. Nicole noticed these changes first in the silence. Gone were the long, tense pauses during meals, the awkwardness of forced pleasantries. Instead, dinner at the cramped apartment table became a place for genuine conversation. Stories about the day, laughter about mistakes, quiet pride in small victories. Linda, her mother, spoke about new friends at work, sharing how she'd finally learned to prioritize listening over defending herself, a skill that, Nicole realized, she'd never been shown by her own parents when she was young. Thomas chatted about his newfound enjoyment in routine. A man who once grumbled about every inconvenience, now eagerly trading tips on budget cooking and city gardening. The distance that had defined them, the invisible wall that separated Nicole from her parents and brother, was slowly, carefully dismantled. It wasn't perfect. Some nights, old resentments bubbled up. Harsh words spoken in stress or exhaustion still stung. But now, even their arguments held a new shape. One that allowed for apologies, for vulnerability, for the possibility of forgiveness rather than denial. Nicole savored this change. In her heart, she measured the taste of justice, not by revenge or strict equality, but by the chance to be seen, to have her hurt heard and honored at last. She sometimes caught her father watching her across the table, as if truly seeing his daughter for the first time, not as a background character in Benjamin's light, but as a person with her own history, her own wounds, her own worth. Linda, who once bristled at being challenged, now consulted Nicole about daily dilemmas, honest questions about relationships and mistakes, not just obligatory updates. She'd learned humility the hard way and discovered both its weight and its lightness. Benjamin was, perhaps, the most changed. Always the golden child, he'd come face to face with failure and mediocrity. For months, he'd resented Nicole, treating her rules as punishment. But earning his keep, working at the very base level of inner voice, and seeing his own parents struggle beside him, forced a sea change. One evening, as the last hints of summer faded, Benjamin arrived home with a handwritten thank you card, his first ever for Nicole. He placed it quietly at her door. Inside, he had scrawled, "I never really saw you until now. Thank you for making me look. Thank you for giving us a second chance." Nicole read it under the soft light of her desk lamp and cried, not with bitterness, but with relief and hope. The process of finding empathy was gradual and often uncomfortable. Nicole had insisted on counseling, not just for herself, but for the family. Therapy sessions ranged from explosive to cathartic. Loyal as always to her sense of fairness, Nicole made sure that every member had a turn to speak and be heard. They confronted the past openly, discussing favoritism, neglect, the small cruelties that accumulate in childhood and echo for decades. Nicole finally described what it was like to watch her achievements dismissed, her birthdays forgotten, her dreams dimmed by parental comparison. The words weren't easy to say or to hear, but for the first time, her parents and brother believed her. Linda, her mother, wept during those first sessions. "I thought I was just doing what my mother taught me," she admitted, voice trembling. "But I never realized what it cost you." Thomas, stubborn and proud for most of his life, found himself apologizing, first awkwardly, then with genuine grief, for the ways he'd failed to protect Nicole. Benjamin offered his own confession, acknowledging that he'd relished his favored status, even when it meant pushing his sister into the shadows. Each person's honesty became a stepping stone, With every difficult conversation, Nicole felt the air between them become lighter, the knots in her own chest loosen. Apart from words, it was shared experience that cemented the lesson. There were rainy mornings when the entire family waited, huddled for a late bus. Laughter bubbling up as they dashed to work in cheap plastic ponchos. There were community potlucks, during which the Millers, awkwardly at first, volunteered to help with setup and cleanup, only to discover the warmth of neighbors' smiles. Nicole often stood in the background, quietly watching as her parents cheered for her brother during a softball game with company colleagues, or when they, in turn, celebrated her project's success in a way they'd never done when she was young. Justice, as Nicole had come to believe, wasn't a grand gesture. It was the incremental, daily act of choosing empathy, of meeting each other, not as failings, but as people capable of change. She didn't wipe away the past, but she didn't let it dictate the present either. When anniversaries came, they celebrated together. When someone was promoted or failed, the family responded not with blame or envy, but with support. By the end of the year, Nicole saw her family blossom in ways she hadn't dared imagine. Linda, once so rigid and status conscious, became a confidant to several younger co-workers who struggled with self-doubt and city loneliness. She started organizing lunches and sharing stories about resilience, often echoing lessons she'd learned the hard way from Nicole herself. Thomas gravitated toward the community's older volunteers, lending his patience and kindness to those who, like him, had lost their way and were looking for new purpose late in life. The elder Miller's dignity was no longer borrowed from comfort or appearance. It had been hard-won, and it showed in the gentle pride that colored their every success, big and small. Benjamin, meanwhile, went from defensive sarcasm to actual gratitude. He began showing up for nightly family meals, asking how everyone's day was, offering to help with chores. He even started coaching local teens in computer basics, drawing on technical skills gained at Inner Voice. And he told Nicole, awkwardly at first, then with growing warmth, that her example made him want to be a better brother and a better man. Nicole felt a truer connection with Benjamin than she ever had as children, when rivalry and imbalance eclipsed affection. Through persistence and honesty, the Millers transformed familial justice from an abstract ideal into a living, breathing pact. The kinds of wounds that once seemed destined to fester instead became sources of understanding. Nicole insisted that the journey wasn't about erasing the scars. They all bore them, but about recognizing each one as evidence of survival, endurance, and the will to repair what had been broken. On a balmy autumn evening, Nicole gathered her parents and brother for a simple but celebratory dinner in their apartment. The menu was humble: spaghetti, garlic bread, a homemade chocolate cake, but the atmosphere shimmered with something rare: genuine joy and the comfort of belonging. Nicole saw the lasting bonds forged through a year of shared adversity, and she allowed herself a moment to bask in the sweetness of this new family dynamic. When dinner ended, she handed each member of the Miller family a personalized letter. In it, Nicole recounted a moment from childhood, often something the recipient had forgotten, or perhaps never noticed at all, and explained how it had shaped her. It was part gratitude, part closure, and a final act of empathy extended from the heart of her own hard-won wisdom. For Linda, Nicole recalled the night she'd sat quietly by her daughter's bedside after a fever, a small gesture that survived in Nicole's memory longer than any rebuke. For Thomas, it was a story of quiet endurance and his ability to make Nicole laugh during the hardest years. For Benjamin, she simply wrote, Thank you for being willing to try. Again, Nicole also enclosed with each letter a newly minted contract. The family debts, old and new, were settled. She offered her parents roles at Inner Voice, with competitive pay and ongoing training if they wished to stay, and left the choice of returning home or remaining in Detroit entirely up to them. Benjamin received a glowing recommendation from his manager, opening doors at other companies, or for advancement within Inner Voice, should he wish to pursue it. As they read, tears flowed, the cathartic release of burdens long shouldered alone. No one spoke for several minutes, but in that heavy silence, a new sense of peace settled over the room. Nicole's requirements had been difficult, sometimes even harsh, but in the crucible of adversity, the family had discovered strength, humility, and compassion they never would have found through charity alone. The lesson of justice, as Nicole had defined it, became a legacy the family would never forget. Over the months that followed, the Millers' relationships with one another continued to evolve. Linda and Thomas chose to remain in Detroit, finding joy in their new community and freedom from the old patterns that had shackled them in the past. Benjamin bounced between cities, taking on new tech projects, but always keeping in touch, calling Nicole regularly for advice or just to share a laugh. Holidays became genuine celebrations, filled with the noisy, warm confusion of a family that had fought to become whole together. Nicole, for her part, felt both relief and pride. The circle had finally closed. She was no longer just the forgotten daughter or the family's silent pillar. She had become the architect of justice and the teacher of empathy, proving to herself and to those who once underestimated her that the truest kind of power is measured not in dollars or prestige, but in one's capacity to forgive, to insist on fairness, and to love with discernment. There were still moments of pain, of course. Old wounds left marks, especially during the rare return visits to Cedarville. Sometimes Nicole flinched at small slights or noticed her mother's voice falling into old patterns. Yet now, those moments were addressed, not ignored. The family talked through their feelings, sometimes with the help of their former therapist, and moved forward instead of retreating into silence. Nicole grew more patient, Linda and Thomas more self-aware, Benjamin more present and dependable. Empathy, Nicole realized, didn't mean forgetting the past or pretending everything was perfect. It meant meeting each day with a willingness to do better, to see one another's scars, and to accept the hard-won dignity of those who have walked through fire. As she looked at her family, transformed, at last, by the taste of justice and the nourishment of empathy, Nicole knew she'd finally allowed herself to belong not only to them, but to herself. Her own story, once shadowed by neglect and longing, now gleamed with the soft light of self-respect and mutual recognition. The bond she'd helped forge was imperfect, but it was resilient. And in this, Nicole discovered a kind of joy and healing she hadn't thought possible. The taste of justice and empathy was bittersweet, but it was, in the end, the most satisfying flavor of all.